Hello everyone. In this video, we will do the daily current affairs analysis of the news items which were in news on 27th September 2021. Okay, so what all topics we will discuss? First, we will see the PM CARES Fund which has been in news recently. Next, we will see the Competition Commission of India and what is the concept of cartelization. Okay, next we will study about the dark energy. What is it and how it plays an important role in the formation of black holes. Okay. Next, we will see the cyclone Gulag, how the cyclones are named and how the cyclones, tropical cyclones particularly form, and what are the threats associated with them, and what are the initiatives which are undertaken, and further measures to which can be undertaken to better fight against fight against these cyclones. Next, we will study about the state government report on Chennai floods, basically the concept of urban flooding, how they are caused and what are the negative consequences of these urban floods, and how to the measures which can be taken to the structural and non-structural measures which can be taken to enhance the fight against these urban floods. Okay. Next, we will see the multi-member ward system in Maharashtra. What is it? The details about it we will discuss. Next, we will study the campaign launched for social accountability law, like what is social accountability law and why is there a campaign launched for this. Okay, so first topic in news is the PM cares fund. Okay, it is important for GS paper 2. Topic is separation of powers between various organs, dispute redressal mechanisms and institutions. So why is this in news? That recently the central government of India has informed the Delhi High Court that the PM cares fund is not a fund of government of India and the amount does not go into the consolidated fund of India. Okay, so the central government has informed the Delhi High Court that the fund which is collected under the PM CARES fund that does not amount to be a fund of the government of India in the sense that it does not go into the consolidated fund of India. Okay, but that does not mean that the fund which is collected under the PM CARES fund, that fund cannot be used for any of the government initiatives. This is not the true essence of the central government affidavit which has been filed. Okay, so background is the center's affidavit came in response to a petition filed before the High Court seeking to declare PM CARES as a public authority under the Right to Information RTI Act. Okay, so what the government has said, irrespective of whether the trust is a state or other authority within the meaning of Article 12 of the Constitution of India, and or whether it is a public authority within the meaning of Section 2H of Right to Information Act, Section 8 in general, and that of provisions contained in subsection E and J in particular of the Right to Information Act, it is not permissible to disclose third party information. So basically the government has said that as PM CARES is not a public authority, so the government is not bound to disclose the third party information under the RTIs which are filed under the Right to Information Act. Okay, and to ensure transparency, the audited report is put on the official website of the trust along with the details of utilization of funds received by the trust. Okay, so that will enhance the transparency of the collected funds. Okay, so about the PM CARES fund, what is it? The Prime Minister's Citizen assistance and relief in emergency situations PM CARES Fund was set up to accept donations and provide relief during the COVID-19 pandemic and other similar emergencies. So, a few more details about this fund. It was set up as a public charitable trust with the trust deed registered on March 27, 2020. It can avail donations from the foreign contribution, and donations to fund can also avail 100% tax exemption. Okay, so if you donate some amount to the PM CARES fund, then you can avail 100% tax exemption in that. Okay, so PM CARES is different from the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund. PMNRF is a different thing than the PM CARES fund. Okay, so who administers the PM CARES fund? Prime Minister is the ex officio chairman of the PM CARES fund, and the Minister of Defense, Minister of Home Affairs, and Minister of Finance, Government of India are the ex officio trustees of the fund. Okay, so this can be a potential statement in prelims. You have to remember this. Okay, so what are the important topics for prelims? What is a public account? Who administers PM CARES funds? Which organizations are exempted from the ambit of RTI Act? what is Consolidated Fund of India, what is a charitable trust, and also about the NDRF. Okay, so what is the purpose of giving these important topics for prelims in the heading prelims hot link, that to help the aspirants to get the understanding about how they should go about when they are studying a particular topic. Like if they are studying, for example, about PM CARES Fund, so what are all the additional topics and subtopics which they have to study, from which the UPSC is expected to make questions. Okay, because it is very rare that UPSC frames questions from those topics which are in news directly. Either UPSC, what it does, it picks a particular topic and it goes very deep into that topic and then frames a question. Or what the examiner does, if there's a particular topic, for example, PM CARES Fund in news, so rather than giving a question directly on PM CARES Fund, but he or she will do, they will make a question on either Consolidated Fund of India, or the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund, or the details of RTI Act, because it has been in news that PM CARES Fund is not a public authority under the RTI Act. So these are the things which you have to study when you are reading a particular topic, because these additional informations which you gain while covering the daily current affairs is the most crucial aspect of your preparation, because the questions have the highest probability to be framed from these topics only. Okay, so this is the exact purpose of giving the prelims hot link important topics, so that the aspirants have a better understanding about how to go about their preparation and how to further align their current affairs preparation when they are studying a particular topic. Okay, so source of this news is the Hindu. Next important topic in news is the Competition Commission of India and the concept of cartelization. Okay, so it is also important for GS paper 2. Topic is statutory organization. So why it has been in news? Last week, the Competition Commission of India found that three beer companies had colluded to fix beer prices for a full decade between 2009 and 2018. So what these companies did, they had their understanding that we will set a common price for the beer, so that our market shares do not drop drastically, and also the profits are shared amongst us. Okay, so this is the concept of cartelization. Okay, as a result, the CCI slapped a penalty of rupees 873 crore on the companies for cartelization in the sale and supply of beer in 10 states and union territories. So what is a cartel? According to CCI, Competition Commission of India, a cartel includes an association of producers, sellers, distributors, traders, or service providers who by agreement amongst themselves limit, control, or attempt to control the production, distribution, sale, or price of or trade in goods or provision of services. So it is nothing but an association of either the traders, sellers, distributors, manufacturers, etc., who have an direct or indirect agreement between themselves to control either the production or the supply or the sale or the price of any of the goods or services, so that they can reap the maximum benefits of the sales, or reap the maximum benefits of the demand of that particular product or service. Okay, so this is illegal as per the provisions under the CCI Act, Competition Commission of India Act. Okay, so the three common components of a cartel are an agreement between competitors to restrict competition. Okay, so it is an agreement, cartel is an agreement between competitors to restrict competition, so that the profits can be maximized and the demand of that particular good or service can be enhanced further. Okay, because when there is an agreement between the competitors themselves which are providing a particular product or good or a service in the market, and when they have an direct or an indirect agreement between themselves, so the demand, price of the either the price or the production or the supply of that good or service is bound to be influenced because of the agreement between the competitors. And as a result, there can be a situation when there's an artificial shortage created of that good or service because of the agreement which was undertaken between the competitors. Okay, so that can enhance the demand of a particular good or service, and can also help the competitors to mutually enhance the price of a particular good or service. so that their profits can be maximized. And that is why it is against the provisions of the Competition Commission of India, because Competition Commission of India Act, what it does, it aims to provide an uh, without restrictions. It aims to provide a market without any restrictions, without any control, or without any illegal control by any of the manufacturer or the retailer or the distributor, etc. Okay. So features of a cartel: the agreement that forms a cartel need not be formal or written. It can be an indirect agreement also, as we have discussed. So cartels almost invariably involve secret conspiracies. Here, competitors refers to companies at the same level of the economy, manufacturers, distributors, or retailers in direct competition with each other to sell goods or provide services. So what do these cartels do? So, for example, consider a situation that there is a college. Okay, there's a particular college or a big university is there. For example, there's a university, and there are five shops. Okay, five photocopy shops outside that university. And before, what they did, that they were charging, he was charging 1 rupees per photocopy. He was charging 0.25 per photocopy. He was charging 0.5 per photocopy. He was charging 0.75. He was charging 0.8 per page for photocopy. So that profit was distributed amongst all of these. Okay, so what they did a mutual agreement, indirect agreement, that all will charge rupees 1 for photocopying each page. Okay, so the demand of the students, it got distributed amongst all. Okay, so the profits also enhanced gradually, because everyone was providing the photocopy for rupees 1 only. Okay, as they had a mutual and indirect agreement between them. So that is the what the concept of cartelization basically means. Okay, so what do these cartels do? They do the price fixing. Output restrictions are also done by these. Market allocation is also controlled. Bid rigging is also done in the government tenders, etc. So in simple terms, participants in hardcore cartels agree to insulate themselves from the rigors of a competitive marketplace, substituting cooperation for competition. So what are the challenges posed by cartels? Cartels hurt not only the consumers but also indirectly undermine the overall economic efficiency and innovations. So by artificially holding back the supply or raising prices in a coordinated manner, companies either force some consumers out of the market by making the commodity stay bare, more scarce, or by earning profits that free competition would not have allowed. So a cartel shelters its members from full exposure to market forces, reducing pressures on them to control costs and to innovate. So why do these companies resort to cartelization? The companies blamed government rules, which required them to seek approvals from state authorities for any price revisions, as the main reason for forming a cartel. So now you see about the Competition Commission of India. So the Competition Commission of India was established under the Competition Act 2002 for the administration, implementation, and enforcement of the Act, and was duly constituted in March 2009. Chairmen and members are appointed by the central government. You have to remember this. Okay. So what are the functions of the CCI? It is duty of the commission to eliminate practices having adverse effects on competition, promote and sustain competition, protect the interests of the consumers, and ensure freedom of trade in the markets of India. So the commission is also required to give opinion on competition issues on a reference received from a statutory authority established under any law, and to undertake competition advocacy, create public awareness, and impart training on competition issues. So the Competition Act, the Monopolies and Destructive Trade Practices Act 1969 (MRTP) Act was repealed and replaced by the Competition Act 2002 on the recommendations of the Raghavan Committee. You have to keep this thing in mind. This can be a potential statement in prelims. Okay, Raghavan Committee recommended the formation of the Competition Commission of India, and as a result, it was formed. replacing the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act 1969. Okay, so the CCI Act 2002, as amended by the Competition Amendment Act 2007, prohibits anti-competitive agreements, abuse of dominant positions by enterprises, and regulates combinations, acquisition, acquiring of control, and M&A, which causes or likely to cause an appreciable adverse effect on competition within India. So what are the prelims important topics for prelims associated with this news? About the Competition Commission of India, highlights of the Competition Act and amendments to it, about NCLT, National Company Law Tribunal, and its jurisdiction. What is cartelization? Okay, so source of this news is the Indian Express. Next is, what is dark energy? It is important for GS paper 3. Topic is awareness in space. So why it is in news? Recently, an international team of researchers made the first direct detection of dark energy. They noticed certain unexpected results in the Xenon 1T experiment and write that dark energy may be responsible for it. So what is dark energy? More is unknown than is known about this concept of dark energy. We know how much dark energy there is because we know how it affects the universe's expansion. Other than that, it is a complete mystery, but it is an important mystery. Okay, it makes up about 68% of the universe. Dark energy is a hypothetical form of energy that exerts a negative repulsive pressure, behaving like the opposite of gravity. It causes the rate of expansion of our universe to accelerate over time rather than to slow down. That's contrary to what one might expect from a universe that begin in a big bang. Okay, so it accelerates the expansion rather than slowing the expansion. Okay, this dark energy, and it constitutes around 68% of our universe. So how is dark energy different from the dark matter? Everything we see, the planets, moons, massive galaxies, makes up less than 5% of the universe. About 25% is dark matter and 68% is dark energy. While dark matter attracts and holds galaxies together, dark energy repels and causes the expansion of our universe. So what dark matter does? It attracts. Okay, it is like the gravitational force. Dark matter attracts. Okay, attracts the galaxies and holds them together. While the dark energy, it is opposite to gravitation. What it does, it repels. It repels the galaxies and other particles in the universe, and it leads to the expansion of our universe. Okay, so this is the most important distinction between the dark matter and dark energy, and you have to keep that in mind. Also, keep this in mind that dark matter constitutes around 27% of our universe, while the dark energy constitutes around 68% of our universe. Okay, so the existence of dark matter was suggested as early as the 1920s, while the dark energy wasn't discovered until 1998. Okay, so the dark matter is around 23 to 27% of our universe, and dark energy is around 68 to 72% of our universe. So about the Xenon 1T experiment. So it is the world's most sensitive dark matter experiment and was operated deep underground the INFN laboratory Nazionale del Gran Sasso in Italy. It uses the dual-phase liquid-gas xenon technique and is located underground at the laboratory Nazionale del Gran Sasso of INFN, Italy. So the theory, what is the theory of general relativity? The leading theory, however, considers dark energy a property of space. Albert Einstein was the first to understand that space was not simply empty. He also understood that more space could continue to come into existence. So, in his theory of general relativity, Einstein included a cosmological constant to account for the stationary universe scientists thought existed. So, after the Hubble announced the expanding universe, Einstein called his constant his biggest blunder. But Einstein's blunder may be the best fit for dark energy. Predicting that empty space can have its own energy, the constant indicates that as more space emerges, more energy would be added to the universe, increasing its expansion. Okay. So this concept of theory of general relativity is the underlying principle behind the formation of black holes also. and all these things, the black hole, the dark energy, and the dark matter, all these are interlinked. So you have to keep this in mind, particularly for the prelims. Okay. So next we will see cyclone Gulab. GS paper 1 topic is important geophysical phenomenon such as earthquake, tsunami, volcanic activity, cyclone, etc. So why it is in news? Cyclone Gulab is likely to hit east coast of India. It is formed in the Bay of Bengal region. So the name was given by Pakistan. Pakistan gave the name Gulab to this cyclone. So how are the cyclones formed? Cyclones are formed over the oceanic water in the tropical region. So in this region, the sunlight is highest, which results in warming of land and water surface. So due to warming of the surface, the warm moist air over the ocean rises upwards, following which cool air rushes in to fill the void. They too get warm and rise. The cycle continues. As we know that air always moves from area of high pressure to low pressure. Okay. So wherever the temperature is high, above that the area of high pressure is created. Okay. So that is why the air moves from area of high pressure to low pressure. Okay, so these are the categories of cyclones. Super cyclonic storm having winds greater than 2 to 2 kilometer per hour, and all these you can see. Next is, but what creates the wind always blows from high pressure to low pressure areas. High pressure areas are created in the cold region, while low is created in the warm regions. Okay, so in the warm regions, wherever the temperature is high, there the areas of low pressures are created, and where the temperatures are low, which are the colder regions, there the areas of relatively higher pressure are created. So that is why the wind moves from areas of high pressure to low pressure, that is from colder regions to warmer regions. Okay, so polar regions are high pressure areas, as the amount of sunlight here is less than the tropical region. So wind blows from polar regions to tropical regions. Then comes the Earth's movement, which is west to east. Okay, west to east. The Earth's rotation on its axis causes deflection of the wind in the tropical region, as the speed of spinning of Earth is higher compared to polar sides due to its spherical shape, blowing from both the polar regions. So wind coming from the Arctic is deflected to the right, while Antarctic wind deflects to the left side. Okay, so wind is already blowing in a direction, but when it reaches the warmer place, cool air starts getting attracted to the center to fill the gap. So while moving to the center, cool air keeps getting deflected, resulting in circulation of a wind movement. This process continues until the cyclone hits the land. So what happens when a cyclone hits the land? The cyclone dissipates when it hits the land, as the warm water that rises and creates a space for cool water is no longer available on land. Also, the moist air that rises up forms clouds, leading to rains that accompany gusting winds during cyclones. So, prelims hot link, important topics for prelims: factors responsible for the genesis of cyclones, naming of cyclones in various regions of the world, why are there more cyclones in eastern coast of India, what is Coriolis force, which deflects the wind to the right in the northern hemisphere and deflects the wind to the left in the southern hemisphere, what is the latent heat of condensation. All these are important topics for prelims. Source of this news is The Hindu. Next is the state government report on Chennai floods. It is important for GS paper 3. Topic is disaster management. So why it is in news? Tamil Nadu state government has released a report on the action taken by the government with regard to measures to prevent a recurrence of flooding. The report was in response to the National Green Tribunal registering a suo motu case. The court had done so after newspapers widely reported areas in the city being flooded, in addition to an overflow of sewage on November 30, 2020. So what has the report said? Cases for causes for flooding. What are the causes for flooding? Okay, so encroachment, faulty drainage systems, and tampering of natural course of water has made the megapolis prone to flooding every year. So the things like encroachment, faulty drainage systems, and tampering of natural course of water due to huge buildings being built, and the large number of encroachments being done, this has resulted to the megapolis being prone to flooding every year. Okay, Chennai. So rapid urbanization of Greater Chennai and its peri-urban areas has led to massive changes in land use patterns as residential areas have sprung up in farmlands. So the changes in land use patterns were done without making the required changes for a proper drainage system to manage the flow of surplus water from traditional tanks as well as flood waters from catchment areas. Okay, so irrigation tanks were choked with waste, slush and debris obstructing the flow of flood water. This also reduced the water absorbing and groundwater recharging capacity of the marsh. So measures which are suggested: Chennai needs an integrated flood management system with proper facilities to drain excess rainwater and desilts channels to prevent floods. So the report recommended an integrated road and street side storm water drainage network, straight cut diversion channels, macro storm water drains, check dams, barrages, and any cuts as part of such a system. So, urban floods in India, an overview. Urban flooding is the inundation of land or property in a built environment, particularly in more densely populated areas, caused by rainfall overwhelming the capacity of drainage systems such as storm sewers. In many Indian cities, urban floods have become a frequent phenomenon in recent years. Unscientific urbanization leading to urban floods. Natural factors which are responsible: increasing downpour, cyclonic storms and thunderstorms, occurrence of high tides impeding the drainage in coastal areas, anthropogenic factors, concretization, wiping out of the wetlands, poor water and sewerage management, encroachment and illegal constructions, deforestation, administrative factors, lack of flood control measures, multiple authorities in a city but owning responsibility by none. Okay, so these are the administrative factors which are responsible for high instances of urban floods. Okay, so what are the measures needed? Structural measures which are needed: conservation of wetlands in urban areas like lakes, ponds, streams, etc. Construction of a differential slope along sidewalks, roads to drain excess water into reservoirs, strengthening of a storm water drainage system, pre-monsoon desilting of all major drains to be completed by March 31 each year. Every building in an urban area must have rainwater harvesting as an integral component of the building utility. Concept of rain gardens to be incorporated in planning for public parks and on-site storm water management for larger colonies and sites. Those are to be developed. Suitable interventions in the drainage system like traps, trash racks can be provided to reduce the amount of solid waste going into the storm sewers. Non-structural measures. National Hydrometeorological Network, as per NDMA, is needed for all urban cities in India. Flood hazard assessments should be done on the basis of projected future scenarios of intensities and duration of rainfall and land use changes. Better forecasting of rainfall events, timely dissemination of information to the mass, nowcasting alerts or real-time weather updates, uh, restricts encroachments in natural drainage areas, clearance of river beds, proper implementation of coastal regulation zone rules, provisions for flood proofing of buildings, stormwater pollution control, that is, sources controlled by imposing quality standards for wastewater and solid waste disposals in urban environments. Okay, so the sources, the Down to Earth magazine. So the next is the multi-member ward system in Maharashtra. It is important for GS paper 2. Topic is functions and responsibilities of the union and the states, issues and challenges pertaining to the federal structure, devolution of powers and finances up to the local levels, and challenges therein. So why it is in news? The Maharashtra cabinet recently cleared a plan for multi-member wards in urban civic bodies, excluding Mumbai. With this, the state has reverted to the system of electing multiple councillors or corporators from every ward in all municipal corporations and municipal councils in the state, excluding Mumbai. The state government will promulgate an ordinance to make the amendment. So what's proposed in Maharashtra in the new system? Voters will elect a three-member panel in each of the wards in municipal corporation areas. In municipal council areas, voters will elect a panel of two members. In a single member ward system, a voter votes for one candidate. There will be no change in the number of wards or corporators. The wards will be bunched together only for the purpose of the election. Okay, so ward system 2002, 45 wards with 3 corporators in 44 wards, 4 in 1 ward. House strength was total 141. So this is the evolution you can study. Finally, in 2017, there were 38 wards in Maharashtra. 4 corporators were in 37 wards with 2 male and 2 female. So ward number 38 had 3 corporators. House strength was 156. So how does it work? Those contesting from the same party or alliance across designated multi-member ward will campaign across the 2 or 3 wards, although they will file their nomination from individual wards. If elected, each will represent the individual ward only. Voters, however, will be able to select candidates in their own ward as well as in the other wards clubbed together in the multi-member ward. Although candidates from the same party alliance in a multi-member ward will be called a panel, a voter does not really select a panel but individual candidates who can be from the same party or from different parties also. So a voter is also entitled to select just one candidate, but for this the voter has to make a written submission to the presiding officer of the booth. This is to ensure documentary proof in case a party or candidate goes to court questioning how a candidate got fewer votes than others. So benefits associated with multi-member system. It appears to help a party or alliance maximize its seats. A party can offset weak candidates with strong ones in a multi-member ward. The hope is that the strongest of the candidates will carry the day for the others in the panel, even though this is not guaranteed. So what are the issues and concerns associated? Usually in a multi-member ward, no corporator allows the others to work properly and all try to outdo one another. This is the most important issue and concern associated with this system. Okay, so the source of this information is the this news is the Indian Express. So next is the campaign launched for social accountability law. It is important for, it is a prelim specific topic. It is particularly important for prelims. So a statewide campaign has been launched in Rajasthan for demanding passage of the social accountability law in the next assembly session. Social accountability refers to actions initiated by citizen groups to hold public officials, politicians, and service providers to account for their conduct and performance in terms of delivering services, improving people's welfare, and protecting people's rights. So this is the basic meaning of the social accountability, and hence a campaign has been launched in Rajasthan to demanding the passage of the social accountability law. Okay, okay, which demands the citizen groups to hold public officials, politicians, service providers, etc., accountable for their conduct and performance. Okay, in terms of delivering services, improving people's welfare, and protecting people's rights. Okay, so these are the important topics of today. Thank you for so much for watching this analysis video. Have a nice day.